why is CO2 tolerance important as an athlete and a human being? And how can we train it to include it into our overall training routines? Well, I'm about to explain all this. So essentially with CO2 tolerance, the reason why it's so important is because it is the chemoreceptors in our brain, as well as in our blood vessels, that signal our diaphragm to start the sensation of breathing. And also you get the tightness in here. Essentially it just tells you when you need to breathe. Now, if your breathing habits are improper and you're just not conscious of your breathing, over several years you can tend to overbreathe, because that's what happens when you're in stress. And if you're not conscious of it, you will always be overbreathing. And what this does is it offloads a lot of that carbon dioxide. So you're hyper-oxygenating your system without really having the CO2 in your body to absorb it. And when I say absorb it, there's the science behind it is that there's this thing called the Bohr effect. And essentially with the Bohr effect, when oxygen is binded to hemoglobin, the only way for oxygen to leave hemoglobin is to have CO2 present. And basically you need to have enough, you need to have the pH be low enough, because essentially the CO2 turns into carbonic acid, and carbonic acid, it's acidic, so the pH goes down. And you need that acidic condition for oxygen to be released. That's why a lot of people overbreathe and feel like they're not getting enough air. And that's because they aren't oxygenating. They're getting a lot of oxygen, but that oxygen is just staying in their blood vessels. They're not actually releasing it. Thus, by training your CO2 tolerance, you'll be improving your overall oxygenation. And at first it will seem quite counterintuitive, because you are actually going to be breathing less and much more lightly. However, you're actually going to be oxygenating much more efficiently. And this takes practice, because if you're doing years and years and years of this, it's just like any habit. You have to rewrite the habits. You have to release and add a new habit that you want, and that is ideally 6 breaths per minute. And obviously not all the time you're going to be conscious on your breath, unless if you're living in the caves. So when you're thinking about other things, your breath goes unconscious. Now, if your CO2 tolerance is too low, your breathing rate is just going to be much higher, just naturally. So by training your CO2 tolerance, your baseline to be at a higher level, your chemosensitivity to be at a lower level, you're naturally going to breathe slower. So yeah, that's kind of the main gist of it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below, and I'll be happy to explain below.